915 Talk is a production of Desert Voice Media. You can visit desertvoice.media to learn more.
915 TALK.
The world is looking at El Paso.
What will we say to the world? From the KELP studio in El Paso, this is 915 Talk.
And now your host.
Good afternoon, beautiful citizens of the Borderland. This is 915 Talk, and I'm your host, Andy Frecka. We are broadcasting from the heart of the world's largest borderplex, the KELP studio here in El Paso. Whether you're listening on 1590 AM, 95.9 FM in El Paso, or 89.3 FM up in beautiful Las Cruces, I hope you're enjoying your afternoon, and I hope you're really enjoying tuning into these talks about what's happening here in the Borderland. And today we have Mac Daddy Del Norte on the board. Mac Daddy, how you doing?
Yes. Hello, Andy. I'm doing good.
So, Mac Daddy, tell me this.
Yes.
You are a true son of the Borderland.
I am.
How well do you know history?
Man, not too well, to be honest with you.
Not too well?
Not too well. I was just telling Clark this morning that wasn't always my strongest suit because I look towards the future, so I like everything about the future.
You're a what do you call it? A futurologist?
Futurologist. Something like that.
Okay. So today we're going to be talking history. That's one thing I've really been wanting to do here on 915 Talk, is really begin to talk about what happened here in the past, because that really affects us here today, here in the Borderland. So before we start talking about history, as we're talking about history, Mac Daddy Del Norte, tell me, where was the first Thanksgiving?
Where was it?
Yeah.
For me, at my parents' house.
Okay, so
30 years ago.
Yeah,
35 years ago.
Okay, for you, 35 years ago. What about for America?
I don't know. I don't recall.
Where do you think it was? And who was there?
Oh man. Well, if it existed, Adam and Eve had the first
Thanksgiving. Okay, we're just gonna stop this right now, because history is not Mac Daddy Del Norte's strong suit at all. But as I was looking at how to really have these conversations about history, you know that as a futurologist, Mac Daddy, that I love AI. Well, recently it's been a thing.
Yes.
And AI is scary for a lot of reasons, but I went on AI and I said, hey, AI, this is Andy Frecka, host of 915 Talk on KELP Radio, and I want to have a historian on who will tell us about the Borderlands history. And I want them to be really interesting to talk to. I want them to be really good looking, because it's radio. And AI gave me one answer. They gave me one name. And that's who our guest today.
Nice.
I reached out to him and he said AI is always wrong. But as I talked to him, I found out that AI is right. Is definitely right yet again. So without further ado, let's give a very warm Borderland welcome to the one, the only, Mr. Bernie Sargent.
Good morning, gentlemen, and you too, your sidekick there.
Yeah, Mac Daddy Del Norte.
Mac Daddy Del Norte, yeah. 30 years ago, geez. God, what a young squirt. 30 years ago, I'd already been out of the service for years.
Yeah, we allow the young ones into the station.
Gee whiz.
So Bernie, it's so excited for this conversation, and I feel like before we get into everything we're going to talk about today, because we're going to talk about someone who deserves the Medal of Honor from El Paso. We're going to be talking about the Whistler Cannon. I hope we get to that, because you wrote a book on that. But before we get into that, we need to help Mac Daddy Del Norte out. Tell Mac Daddy Del Norte where the first Thanksgiving in America was.
I was just a little bit southeast of San Elizario, on the banks of the Rio Grande.
Okay. So what I was taught in school, I grew up in Ohio.
I'm sorry.
I was taught in school, yeah. Hey, now.
So I was right.
Yeah. So I was taught in school that the first Thanksgiving was in Plymouth Rock, the Pilgrims, Squanto, which I'm sure was a great Thanksgiving.
That was
And
Tonto's grandfather, wasn't it? Squanto?
Tonto, yeah, and Lone Ranger was there the whole thing. But I just started reading a history book of El Paso, which is great because I'm now here in El Paso. I need to learn the history, and it said the first Thanksgiving in America was right here in El Paso. So I think we need to save that for a future conversation, maybe just before Thanksgiving. But for today, let's kind of jump into this whole thing with this Medal of Honor. Well, what would you call it, Bernie? A candidate, or what is the situation?
I would say a long overdue candidate for the Medal of Honor. This gentleman we're talking about, Marcelino Serna, was perhaps the most decorated individual from the state of Texas. Actually, he was Mexican, but he resided in Texas, or he resided most of his life in Texas. Perhaps the most decorated soldier from World War I from the state of Texas. And
Okay.
yeah.
So the most decorated soldier in World War I was originally from Mexico. That's
Yes.
what you're saying. But
Yes.
he was a Texan, so he was an immigrant.
Yes, he was.
So how is it that he moved from Mexico to Texas?
Well,
To
there
the
was a
great nation of Texas.
there you go. Opportunity, the land of golden opportunity. Well, and that I think that's what kind of drove him to it. His family worked the silver mines southeast of Chihuahua City.
Okay.
And it was about the time period that you had the Federales and the Vistas going at it. And Marcelino was a young man, very young man at the time, and he didn't want. I'm thinking he didn't want any part of either side of this situation, because it seemed like every so many years there would be a revolution in Mexico, and I think most people were getting really tired of it by this time period back in the 19 teens. And so Marcelino said, well, I'm going to go to America and seek success, and with that, maybe I can help the family. And that's how he got here. Initially, he worked the railroads in El Paso, and as opportunity prevailed, he went up north to work the beet fields in Colorado. And it was
beet fields.
Beet fields, yeah, it was picking beets up there,
Okay.
along with quite a number of other folks. Well, at this time, there were MPs looking for draft dodgers, so they scooped up anybody and everybody that they came across, and Marcelino was one of them, and took him into the induction center and found out, hey, look, this gentleman is not an American. In fact, he doesn't even speak English. Offered to send him back to Mexico, and he says, no, senor, I fight. But that was the beginning of it.
So he was working the railroad. He goes up to Colorado. He's working in these beet fields. He's trying to avoid war.
Yeah.
But war came to him, and so they pull him in, and they find out he's not even a U.S. citizen.
Correct.
But how do they get him to go to? Well, so basically he was given an option. Is that what happened?
Yes. Well, he insisted on staying because he loved the country. He loved where he was at and the opportunities that he had here, and he thought probably a better future than if he went back to his native southeast of Chihuahua City. So he opted to stay in, and they shipped him to Kansas, where he went through some basic training, and then they shipped him to New Jersey, where they were going through more training before they sent them over to France. And once again, they said, well, wait a minute, you're not an American citizen, much less do you speak English. We're going to send you back to your homeland. He goes, no, I go. So he stayed in and ended up shipping him over to Europe to serve in World War I in France.
So I don't know if you would know the answer to this question, but at what point did he get his U.S. passport in this journey?
When you're in the Army, they don't give you a passport. They just put you on a boat and you send you. And so he was
especially 100 years ago.
Oh, yeah. And the interesting thing about this too is not only was he there with the Americans, he was one of the first. They were one of the first groups, the 82nd, to go in to France and to actually confront the Germans in the trenches.
Okay.
And so he ended up in the trenches in France, actually got gassed not long after he got there, but fortunately survived that. And within a few weeks, he ended up in a couple of situations. If you're in the military, they have what they call a killing zone, where they'll trap you into these areas where they can crossfire machine gun rounds into you and wipe out your whole platoon or company or whatever. And his platoon got stuck in one of these killing zones that the Germans had set up, and they killed a number of Americans. And he said, I'm going to go take care of this. So he literally, on his own, with a pistol, a rifle, and some hand grenades, took off and belly scooted along the ground until he saw the machine gun nest, and he took out a handful of Germans, captured a handful of Germans, and he went back to the American side. And then a couple days later, the same scenario, but this time he killed even more Germans, captured even more Germans, and when he brought back the German prisoners, his American cohorts were so upset that so many Americans were killed, they wanted to take no quarter. In other words, finish them off right then and there, but he would not allow them to kill the Germans, which was kind of an interesting scenario, and I'm happy for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I would love to be able to reach out to some of these families of these Germans that he saved, if that's possible. That would be an interesting story to hear what they hear about this this gentleman on his own that are doing all of this heroic work.
Right. So Marcelino Serta, like I'm saying that correctly. Right?
Serna, Serna.
Oh, Serna. Okay. So
yeah.
Marcelino.
Yeah, you're thinking of mattresses now. Come on.
Yeah. Marcelino Serna, Serna.
Yes.
He's. I feel like I have to rehash this. So he leaves the silver mines of Chihuahua. He works the trains in El Paso. He works the beet fields of Colorado. He's given the choice of going back to Chihuahua or going to war. He's shipped off to New Jersey. He doesn't speak English. He's in the trenches in France in World War I. He survives a gas attack. Then he's in a killing zone, crossfire of Germans, and he single-handedly takes out a machine gun nest with a hand grenade twice.
Yeah, well, the first time, one of the things I failed to mention, there was a sniper, and he saw the sniper shooting from a tree, so he followed the sniper back to the machine gun nest and the Germans, and that's how he found them.
Okay, so we have this Mexican crawling around on his belly, not speaking English in France, saving all the Americans.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's over 100 years later, so I think I could laugh just because it's this is great. This is great. So he saves them, and then twice he captures a bunch of Germans. I have to ask, do you know, was Marcelino Serna like a big guy?
No.
Okay.
No, he was not a very big guy at all. He was just standard height.
Okay.
Mild build. He was fairly lightweight.
Right.
Obviously, he was light enough to scoot around the ground and find his way into German territory. Yeah, he was not a very assuming individual. He just looked like an average person.
Okay, so he's the Rambo of Chihuahua, as we will now call him.
Senor Rambo.
Senor Rambo of Chihuahua.
See.
is taking on all of Germany. So he does this twice, and then basically the American side gets the upper hand, which they didn't have, and the Americans want to just take out all the Germans, but Senor Serna insists that they save the Germans' lives.
Yes.
Okay, what happens next?
Well, the war continued, and 4 days before armistice, he gets wounded. Both legs, he gets shot. So he's in the hospital in France, and while he's there, Pershing presents awards to him. The leader of the French soldiers military presents awards to him. The leader of the Italian, same thing. And then also he gets recognized by the British. So he gets all these awards while he's in the hospital, recuperating, comes back to the United States, back to El Paso, and settles down, just sort of disappears into the fabric of El Paso. He's not interested in medals. He just wants to come back here and become an American. So he's assimilating. And meanwhile, the governor of Texas and the soldier, the general in charge of the troops in this particular area, because they did have a pretty good size number of military because of the uncertainty with what was going on in Mexico at the time. They start looking for him to present more medals. And they finally find him, and they give him a couple more medals, and life goes on. Well, he ends up working odd jobs. He becomes a scoutmaster at Sacred Heart Church. He gets
Okay.
himself citizenship in the United States. He gets married, starts a family, has a number of children. He works at Fort Bliss for a period of time. And then he lives a nice long age until the early 90s, where he passes away of old age. And it just melds into the society. He was the Grand Marshal of the Thanksgiving Day Parade once. That's how the first time I saw him, because I was very much
Okay.
involved with the parade when we lived there. And I thought, well, this is kind of a cool thing. He's a hero. But I didn't know a whole lot of the backstory on Marcelino. And it wasn't until they did a dedication down by Fabens of a crossing into Mexico that they named after him. So they said, well, wait a minute, this guy deserves a little bit of research just to satisfy my curiosity. And that's when I learned that he'd received virtually every medal except the Medal of Honor. And I said, well, why not? And it was like about 8 years ago, almost 9 years ago. And that's when I started this personal campaign to make sure the family got what he so richly deserved.
Right. So I guess he was probably living in Segundo Barrio if he was going to Sacred Heart Church or just
Yes.
somewhere
Mhm.
central El Paso.
Mhm.
We recently had the privilege of having Father Garcia of Sacred Heart Church here on 915 Talk.
Mhm.
But he wasn't looking for ways to trumpet his European escapades and prove that he was a hero. He just, I think the word you used was unassuming, and it seems he lived that way his entire life.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. He was very unassuming. Just wanted to meld into the community and become an American.
Right. And so you had the privilege of speaking with him.
Kind of. That was at the parade, but I really, I just said thank you for your service, because I really didn't know.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I didn't know much
Gotcha.
about him, because when they did the ceremony at the crossing, he'd already had been passed away for a number of years, so his family was there, but that was it.
Do you know, like, over the years, this is not central to the story, it's just interesting because it's El Paso. How well did he learn English over the years after that?
Oh, quite well. Yeah.
Quite well.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Oh, yeah. He did a really good job. My relatives were pretty much the same way when they came over from Europe. The only time they spoke their native language is when they didn't want the kids to know what they were talking about, and which they did quite a bit. But
Yeah.
yeah. So there was a period of time where immigrants, no matter where they came from, they wanted their kids or families to learn the native language.
Right.
And I mean, to fault. I wish my relatives would have taught me several different dialects that they brought with them, the Hungarian, the Slavic, and all that. But they didn't. But I did get to say goulash. I like that a lot.
Yeah, goulash is yeah. Even if you can't say it, it's a pretty good meal.
Oh, yeah.
But so I want to kind of walk through
Sure.
just what is the Medal of Honor. What does it signify? Because I don't think I know. It is the highest military honor as far as I know, right?
Yes, sir. It sure
Yeah.
is.
So I do want to go into more detail with that, but first we're going to take a break. We are with Bernie Sargent, who is a Borderland history aficionado, and just a lot of fun to talk to. Before we go into break, I just want to remind you that 915 Talk is listener supported. It's a production of Desert Voice Media. You can find out more information, how you can become involved at desertvoice.media. That's the site, desertvoice.media. Just click that in. You can see all our past broadcasts at 915 Talk. You can also check out 915 Pray. And really, we just love it when you become involved. Send us a note. And really, any amount that you send is a huge help and a huge encouragement for what we're doing. We believe that these conversations are important for our community. So without further ado, we'll go into a break. Do not touch that dial.
We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial.
Thank you for joining us for these daily conversations on 915 Talk. We believe that these community-centered discussions are key for us to learn how to better serve our city and love our neighbors. 915 Talk is listener-supported and is produced by Desert Voice Media. Your support matters as we endeavor to serve our community. Our website is desertvoice.media. That's right, that's the webpage, desertvoice.media. Your donation of any amount on desertvoice.media provides the fuel for this broadcast. Let's learn together to love our city, love our neighbors, and give God all the glory.
We're back. You're listening to 915 Talk.
And we're back on 915 Talk. I'm your host, Andy Frecka. Today we're talking Borderland history. We're with Mr. Bernie Sargent. Artificial intelligence tells me that he is the man to talk to for all El Paso history. Bernie, it was so much fun for me because I did what I said at the beginning of the program. I really did that. I went on to AI. I used Elon Musk's AI, which is Grok, Grok. And I told the AI that I'm doing this program. I want to talk history. I said, who should I invite in? And they said Bernie Sargent. So I found you, and here we are talking. So it's a fun and weird time to be alive.
I've never been grokked before. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a little awkward to say I'm the first person who ever found you on Grok. I'll put it that way.
Is there medication for that?
Yeah. So Bernie, we're talking about Marcelino Serna, highly decorated veteran. I think he has a true El Paso story because he came from Chihuahua, spent some time in El Paso, spent some time in Colorado, fell in love with America, then became highly decorated just because of his heroic acts in France during World War I, which you outlined in the first part of the program. Tell me more about the Medal of Honor in the way you would explain it to someone who knows nothing about the Medal of Honor, just like me.
It's considered the most prestigious award one could receive, and you only receive that when you exemplify honor, tradition, bravery beyond the call of duty, and it isn't always given to living people. Oftentimes, it's posthumously presented because these people, in their act of bravery, lost their life. But
Right.
to do that, they saved others. When he did his acts of bravery, he actually, by the time it was all said and done, killed 32 Germans and captured 30. And also, in that process, saved 30 Germans' lives, which is an interesting story in itself, as we were talking about in the first segment. But the 32 and the machine gun nests that he took out saved a lot of Americans.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it is the highest honor. You said it already. He was highly decorated, both by the United States and by France and by the United Kingdom.
Yes.
How many medals did he receive? Do you know? Does anybody know? Did he know?
I don't think. Well, at one time some of them got stolen, and they actually replaced them, which I thought was really nice of them to do.
Oh wow. Okay.
I'm going to grab my little book here that I wrote.
Uh-huh. What's the book?
It's called El Paso Sergeant York.
Oh, Paso Sergeant York. You wrote
Yeah.
this book.
Yeah. A Hero's Hero is the subtitle.
So
Sergeant,
okay. Tell me more.
Sergeant York, for those people out there who are not familiar with it, was a story that was put on, was actually filmed about this gentleman. He was his family were very devout, not Quakers, but similar to Quakers. They did not believe in war. They didn't believe in any of these things that would take place. But when he was drafted, he saw the need to fill that void and went ahead and entered the service. Sergeant York did, and he became a hero. He killed quite a few also he was from the back hills of the Appalachians and was very, very good at shooting because that's what they did for a living. To eat, they had to hunt down their prey. And so he was really good. He was a really good shot. That really helped him in World War One. Yeah. Okay,
Right.
let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm counting the medals here. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. More than 11 medals he received. Purple
Okay.
Hearts, several of them. It's just an amazing thing. And in my book, I left the last page empty with room for the Medal of Honor to
Okay.
be placed on there. So when the family does get it, I'll take a picture of that one and put that on that particular book. But that's the book there.
Okay, so for those of you who are listening to the radio, you cannot see this, but Bernie Sargent is holding up his book. For those of you who are watching on KELP Radio YouTube or watching on Facebook Live, El Paso Sargent York, a book written by Bernie Sargent on the life of Private Marcelina Serna. That's super cool. How can people find that book?
Through my email address, which is B Sargent, B as in Bernie, B Sargent TX@gmail.com.
Okay, yeah, and what we'll do is for those folks out there who are interested in getting in touch with you, they can go to desertvoice.media and look for this conversation, and we will put a link for your email in there.
Okay.
I don't want to distract it all from Marcelina Serna, so we'll get later to this article I found about you. The
Uh-oh.
El Paso taxpayer revolt.
Uh-oh. That's why I live 792 miles away.
Yeah. So we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
But Marcelina Serna, you wrote this book.
Yeah.
So what have you done? Because you mentioned just briefly on the phone, you've done some work to get him the Medal of Honor. How does that work? How do you get someone the Medal of Honor, or how do you advocate?
A lot of lobbying I've done for 8+ years in an attempt to get this for his family. We got the actual paperwork through the Pentagon up to Vice President Pence's office when he was in the administration, and it didn't go any further than that because they didn't get reelected. Well, then this last time with the previous administration, actually within 2 weeks of the end of the administration, it got to the White House, to the president's office, and it was kicked back. No reason given. And which was very disheartening because I've been working very closely with LULAC and a number of other organizations to try to make this thing happen. And they were very disappointed. They thought for sure that the previous president would jump on the opportunity, but somebody decided elsewise. So we're working on it again. I've got some contacts with the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. It's already gone through all of the clearance. So all it just needs for him to do is take it over to President Trump and say, we need to make this happen. And so I'm hoping we can do that. I'm not going to give up till it happens.
Well, I could tell because you wrote a book about it. This is serious. I did have a little bit of, we're not a political talk show, but I did have a little bit of a political humor. The president was too busy in his last 2 weeks in office signing pardons. But
oh no, he had that electric pen.
Yeah,
he had the auto pen going.
Yeah. So we won't go any farther down that rabbit trail.
Yeah, where do I push that button? Where do I push that button?
Yeah,
I know it's really sad, but it can be humorous if you want to make it humorous.
Sure. So it made it to Mike Pence. It made it to President Biden. Was kicked back. Now you're working through some contacts who work with Pete Hegseth. Is there like a petition people can sign, or like are we past that?
I think we're past it. What they could do is they could send notes off to any elected official, both local, state, and federal, and remind them that this thing is very pressing and needs to be taken care of. I mean, it's long overdue, and I'm really frustrated over the fact that it hasn't happened. Because to me, it was a given. Someone said, "Well, is it a racial thing?" I said, "Well, yeah, perhaps it was, but it needs to be undone. It's no
Right.
longer a racial thing. But
Yeah.
there was one Hispanic kid. Like he had his father was American, his mother was Hispanic. He did get the Medal of Honor, and from World War One. They lived over in Laredo, and so we were trying to use that, saying, well, this guy's got more medals than that guy there, but
Mhm.
why not? And here's
Right.
a strange twist of fate. You talk about rabbit holes. When I was doing all the research, I've got over 100 newspaper articles from 1918 to 1920 talking about Marcelino Serna from all over the world, literally, that I've
Mhm.
clipped and saved. Then also, I found out in doing my research that the farm that he was working on was owned by a guy named John Sargent. What? No relation for that. What a bizarre twist.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
So, do you know, have our Texas representatives in Washington caught wind of this or?
Oh, yeah. No, they're aware of
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The Escobar's aware of it. She swears she's pushing it hard.
Uh-huh. Yeah, because I mean, it is interesting. I mean, this is a story that, and not just a story, it's a person, it's a life
Hmm.
that El Paso can be very proud of.
Sure.
And although there may have been some racist shading to this story 100 years ago, I do believe, I hope anyway, that we're past that as a
I think we are.
community. Yeah, and so I would think anyone from El Paso would be very proud of this story and really want to see this happen.
Mhm.
So that's an interesting thing where we're at with that.
Oh, I agree. I agree. It's a sad tale of our history, but the thing about history is you learn from it. You don't keep
Right,
repeating it. And I think we've
right.
learned from it. I'm pretty convinced we've learned from it because I've seen a lot of folks uh, with, I wouldn't say as much valor as Marcelino had, of a minority background, get the Medal of Honor. So I think that it's time for him.
Sure. All right. Well, El Paso, Las Cruces, Juarez. This is a true son of the borderland, Marcelina Serna. Shout out to Bernie Sargent, who has been pushing this forward. This is a true son of the borderland who exhibited incredible bravery in World War One. Truly deserving of the Medal of Honor. And I think it's important not just for him to get the Medal of Honor, but for us as a community to get to know these stories. So I appreciate, Bernie, all the effort you've put into this. That's quite interesting, quite fascinating, and inspiring.
And if I could add one thing, the County Historic Commission, which for those of you out there in the listening audience, the viewing audience who don't know what's going on, every county in Texas is mandated to have a county historic commission whose mission is to preserve, promote heritage and culture, history of their counties. And the El Paso County Historic Commission does have a marker, historic marker for Marcelino Serna that they will be placing. We were hoping to do it
Oh,
with the added moniker that he had received or the family had received the Medal of Honor, but they may end up placing the marker before that happens.
okay.
But they do have a marker ready to be put in the ground because they too feel this is an important piece of history that needs to be shared.
Right. That's great. Do you know where that marker will be placed?
I am not absolutely confident. I think they were talking about putting it down in the area of Sacred Heart Church.
Okay, that's
Mhm.
great. Yeah, I love that area. My wife and I were just walking around there yesterday evening.
Yeah, isn't that nice?
Yeah, love it. Okay, so I do want to get into the Whistler Cannon.
Sure.
We're going to switch gears, but before we do that, I think you have exhibited to everyone that you love El Paso,
Hmm. I
but
do.
you moved away.
Yeah.
And I see this website, El Paso Taxpayer Revolt, and it says here Bernie Sargent leaves El Paso. So tell me what's going on, Bernie.
That wasn't the reason we left El Paso, but
Okay.
yeah, living there, I got a bit frustrated because there are a number of things that I was honored and blessed to do for the community, a lot of volunteer service, but one of which was serving on the bond oversight committee. I did that
Mhm.
for 7.5 years, appointed by John Cook when the bond passed. that was to designate different things like an entertainment venue, amongst other things. And this whole fight with Duranguito and that particular neighborhood ensued. And then along the way, we started trying to press the issue that if we're going to, we being El Pasoans at the time, if we're going to levy taxes, let's do it in a common sense way, because it just seemed to be getting out of hand. So myself and, well, there was a couple of people that really led the charge. I just happened to be kind of driving the train along with them, but they were the real leaders. I was very vocal about my opposition to some of the things they wanted to do with the tax money. Because after all, it was you and me paying the taxes, and we wanted to have a better voice, a stronger voice in what was going on with that particular money. And El Paso is not a community that's just full of money. There's a whole lot of people there that don't have a whole lot of cash, and every penny counts. And when you talk about the increase in utilities, the increase in taxes, it got pretty high. We're over in Montgomery County now in East Texas, and the taxes are lower, the utilities are lower, but it's a more affluent community. So, yeah, it's something that the people have to deal with, and sometimes politicians forget whose money they're spending.
Okay. Yeah. No comment from the host of 915 Talk on that.
Hey, that's smart. You'll be a host again tomorrow then.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those of you who just joined in, we're with Bernie Sargent. He's El Paso history aficionado. According to Elon Musk's AI, he is the most interesting person to talk to about El Paso history.
Keeping in mind my initials are BS, would you please?
Yeah. Yeah. So, Bernie, how many books have you written?
I've written three. You don't get rich writing books.
I know. I've also written 3 books.
Okay, there you go. There you go. Yeah, but you're from Ohio. Who reads there, right?
Yeah. Right. Oh, wow. Okay. Okay, Bernie. Okay.
H10. Hey, I can't speak. I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania. So.
My condolences.
I know.
So yeah. So one of your other books is about this Whistler cannon.
Yes.
What is the story of the Whistler cannon?
Another one where you mentioned rabbit holes earlier when we were talking. There's this cannon over at Eastwood High School, and it was called the Blue Whistler. And I'd heard about it, but I didn't know a whole lot about it.
Blue Whistler.
Blue Whistler. Yeah.
Okay. Now I got it. All right.
Yeah. And so I was curious, what's the story with the Blue Whistler? Sort of like what I did with Marcelino Serna. And I started doing research on it. I found incredible history, how it came about, who did it, why they did it, where they did it, and how it ended up ultimately in right next to the gymnasium at Eastwood High School's brand new complex. And so it's a fascinating story from the 1840s to present day. First of all, the Blue Whistler got its nickname because there was an imperfection in the barrel. When it would fire, it would whistle.
Okay.
And because of the colorization of the barrel, it's sort of a blue hue sometimes. So it became the Blue Whistler.
Okay.
And it found its way over to an area just north of Las Cruces, where there was one of the largest military posts back in the 1850s and 60s, Fort Craig. It found its way to Fort Craig mainly because of the Mexican-American Revolution, what was going on, the uncertainty about the purchase of the property through the Gadsden Purchase. Were the Mexicans going to try to get the land back? Those kinds of things. So they had military outposts scattered along the border, and Fort Craig was the largest. Well, when the Civil War broke out, General Sibley, who was a general of the Confederacy, marched through El Paso July of 1861, headed north with aspirations of capturing all of the silver and gold mines in Colorado and California, because they needed the money to feed the cause, to feed the Confederate cause. And he got up to Fort Craig with his soldiers. Well, I should say his troops did. Sibley had a reputation, and not a very it was colorful, but not in a good way, that he was a womanizer, and he would spend more time in his private coach with gals and whiskey than he did commanding his officers. But anyway, they got up to, which is a sordid story, but we won't go into detail on the radio. He got up to Fort Craig, and they got into they bypassed it because they figured they were outnumbered by the Union soldiers at Fort Craig. But the commander at Fort Craig was inept as you could get. He saw that the Confederates were coming, and it scared him, so they started pulling troops out. The Confederates didn't know that, but so they went kind of around it along the Rio Grande, and they got a little bit north of Fort Craig, and a battle ensued. And the Confederates ultimately ended up defeating the Union forces on the banks of the Rio Grande. And in the process, there was a couple of cannons there, one of which was the Blue Whistler, and the Confederates captured the Blue Whistler. Well, the artillery commander for the Union forces was a guy by the name of McCrae. And remember that name because it comes up later. McCrae was killed, and he slumped over the cannon, and with his blood stained the cannon. They captured the cannon, they being the Confederates, and they continued marching north. Again, they wanted to get up into Colorado and then head west and capture that whole area for the Confederacy. Well, they got up a little bit right around the Santa Fe area, a place called Glorieta, where the Union forces had a small contingency of military there, and they got into a battle with them. Well, the Confederates, while they were marching north, were not the greatest of captive people. In other words, they took advantage of everybody along the way. Their money was fictitious. It didn't mean anything. They would destroy the supplies that the farmers and the ranchers had because they didn't want the Union forces to come in behind them, perhaps, and steal it and use it. So it left a lot of these farmers and ranchers with a very bitter taste in their mouth about the Confederacy. Well, when they got up to Glorieta, they had their provisions, their wagons and horses in a canyon where it was somewhat protected. The locals knew where these provisions and everybody were, so they gave a heads up to a number of soldiers from Colorado. They were called the Colorado Regulars. They were brought down to kind of slow down the march of the Confederates. Well, they managed to get down into the canyon, and they killed all the livestock, burned all of the supplies, and killed a handful of Confederate soldiers that were left to guard the wagons. Well, Sibley was astute enough between his dalliances to know that without supplies, without ammunition, without food, there was nothing they could do. They had to retreat. So they started retreating south, and they got as far as Albuquerque. And what artillery they did have, they thought they could use the axles and the wheels to transport what supplies they had. So they left the barrels behind. They just took them off and buried them so that the Union forces couldn't find them. Fast forward about 20 years on a railroad train, there's a gentleman riding in the train. He was the artillery commander for the Confederates that captured the cannon. And sitting next to him was a gentleman who was a scout for the Union forces. So they started talking about Civil War. And they buried the hatchet, so to speak, and they were just a compelling talk about the history. And the cannons came up. So the gentleman from the ex-Union scout, he asked, would it be possible to find these? These would be kind of a wonderful keepsake for not only the folks in Colorado, but also there was a big World's Fair going on in St. Louis. They thought they could send one of the cannons there as a souvenir and send a couple of them south into El Paso because the El Paso soldiers fought with the Confederates, and then ultimately some of them fought with the Union forces a few years later. But said, yeah, okay, we'll try to do that. So this gentleman and the Union gentleman, they decided to go looking for the cannon barrels, and they found them. And they did ship a couple of them down to El Paso, and they gave them to an organization called the Pioneer Association of El Paso. Now, this group got together. It was a bunch of people, the original settlers in El Paso. They got together to for keepsake reason. They wanted to store things that were valuable to the early days of El Paso. They wanted to share stories. And at when they originally formed, the mandate was you had to have lived in El Paso prior to, I believe it was 1890, to be a member of the society. Well, as time went on, obviously the age and everything, they died off, so they opened it up so you could be nominated beyond the Pioneer Society or Association, no matter what, as long as you had this burning desire to preserve and protect and promote the history of El Paso. Well, they had the cannon for a period of time. They used to use it in parades. Whenever there was a dignitary that came in, or July 4th, they'd fire the cannons off to make a big noise out of it. And they had a group that were members of the Pioneer Association called the McGinty Club. And they would dress up. If you're familiar with the Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band cover, how they dressed, how the Beatles dressed.
Okay.
That's how a lot of these folks from the McGinty Club dressed. It was very colorful, and there was a lot of adult beverages involved. So they enjoyed themselves, and they ultimately donated that cannon.
In the spirit of the Confederate commander who took Whistler, the Blue Whistler, originally up to the north of New Mexico.
Yeah.
Adult beverages. Anyway, please continue.
Yeah, they were continuing. Yeah, and interesting story about him too. Sibley, when the war was over, that the Egyptian military hired him. Oh, here's this general from the military. We need his expertise. But he spent more time drinking and womanizing, and they finally fired him. I mean, after about 18 months, they sent him back to the States.
Yeah, so, well, that's actually an incredible achievement to be fired from the Egyptian military in the 1800s. but anyway, yeah. You were talking about adult beverages.
Yes, adult beverages. So anyway, the McGinty Club folded, and the cannon went into storage, and then ultimately went into was bandied about with the Pioneer Association. They actually had it mounted and on exhibit in a park downtown, mm-hmm. And they were very concerned because the revolution was taking place over in Mexico. And one of the Mexican officers who was good friends, or revolutionary officers, good friends with a doctor here who oftentimes helped wounds, or I should say, save soldiers from wounds in Mexico. They were walking past the cannon, and the gentleman said, "We could sure use that." But the doctor said, "Well, we're not allowed to provide any kind of ammunition to the Mexicans, either side, during this situations taking place." He said, "Oh, that's too bad." Well, this particular doctor got an idea that he was going to help them get that cannon, but it wouldn't be legal. Ironically, it was St. Patty's Day, and there was an adult beverages involved, I would imagine. There was a lot of folks that were partying in downtown El Paso. All of a sudden, everybody in the world becomes Irish on that day. Well, anyway, they were having fun. They were enjoying themselves, and the police officer that was supposed to walk around the park, maybe he was Irish, I'm not sure. Anyway, he somehow was not around when the doctor and some of his friends hooked up the cannon to a vehicle, and they towed it out of the park after they cut the chain. They got a few blocks down the road, and the wheel came off. Well, ironically, there was a train track close by, and a hobo got off the train and was walking down the street, and they grabbed him and offered him a few shekels to help put the wheel back on, because it's kind of weighed quite a bit. It's a 12-pounder. It's a pretty big piece of weaponry. They got the wheel back on. He went on his way, and they continued towing it. Well, it was getting close to sunrise now, and all this noise of this cannon being towed down the street, they thought they were going to wake up the world. Well, they were getting pretty close to where they were going to restore it and then smuggle it into Mexico, and the wheel came off again. Well, it was a car full of let's say Irish for the night people that feeling no pain. They kind of fell out of the car because they couldn't figure out what was going on. And when they saw it, they said, "Oh yeah, we'll help you lift it up." So they got it up, got the wheel back on. The drunks got back in their car, took off, and they continued with the cannon. Well, after a few days of work, repairing it, fixing it up, and a number of women putting together the the gunpowder sacks that they have to fire the projectiles that they have to put in the cannon. They got it all set up, and they got 3 wagons, horse-drawn wagons, and they had kids sitting on the wagons with hay and everything, and they put all the pieces underneath the hay and traveled along the border and got down right around the area of where Fort Hancock is, and crossed over into Mexico with the 3 wagons. And as soon as they got across the border, the doctor who went down there and met with them called over here and said, "The baby has arrived." which meant that the cannon was over in Mexico now.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sorry. As you were telling this story involving adult beverages, people masquerading as Irish hobos,
Yeah.
and using children as a cover for an arms smuggling operation.
Mhm.
I lost sight of the total distance they were covering with this cannon.
Well, to take it over to where they restored it, it was about 4 miles. That's all it was.
Okay.
But you can't
Okay.
go very fast pulling a cannon that was
Right,
made in the
right. So
1840s.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So
Uh,
4 miles, and
yeah.
then it crossed where?
Well, they had to take it down to the border
Uh-huh.
from the area was up around right around the Montana,
Okay.
and trying to think of the cross streets it would have been. It was
Yeah.
Montana and Fort Road, and they took it
Okay.
down to the border, and they followed the dirt roads. They didn't have a lot of paved roads back then. All the way down to an area a little bit, I would say, southwest of Fort Hancock, which
Yeah.
was probably 30 to 40 miles, más o
Okay.
menos. And
Right.
then
Okay.
they forged the river there, crossed over with the wagons, and that's
So they didn't take it across through the tunnel that they recently found next to the Eckies.
no. They would have had to leave it in pieces to do that, but
Right.
no. So yeah.
But I love how these kind of stories about this cannon really help us be reminded of the colorful history of our region, because you look at I didn't realize that there were any, I guess you wouldn't call them Civil War battles, but skirmishes in New
Mhm.
Mexico. I didn't realize that had happened, and now I know that there most certainly were. And you follow the story of this cannon that has been dragged all over, and being reminded that there's this part of history where the veterans of the Northern Army and the Confederate Army would meet each other on places like trains and have to have these conversations about what had happened in the past. And the two of them remembered where the cannon had been buried, and they pull it out. They get it back to El Paso. It's
Mhm.
it's 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 really a whole section of our American history that's kind of revealed through this. Well, it's a piece of metal, a weapon.
Mhm.
So that's super interesting. You said that we need to remember the name McCrae.
Yes. Okay, the cannon was used for about 3 months by the Mexicans, and then with big fanfare. I mean, it was a huge celebration. The Mexicans brought it back to the border, and it crossed over downtown back into the United States, where it was put on exhibit again at the park, but this time it was more secured. So it lived there for a period of time, and then during World War II, the there was a call for metal. They needed to melt down as much metal as they could for ammunition and supplies. And so a number of cannons in the El Paso area were melted down. And the story went that the Blue Whistler was one of them. And for the longest time, that's the belief that a lot of people have had. Well, quite a few years ago now, I was asked to go, if I was interested, I was asked to go over to the uh, school district. I'm trying to remember the school district. It's not a school district. They had restored the Blue Whistler, and they asked me if I wanted to see it. Well, I was really excited to see it because, first of all, I wanted to see it. Secondly, was it the Blue Whistler? Because I didn't know for sure, and I wanted to dispel any doubt in my mind whether or not it was the Blue Whistler. So I went over along with a couple of other people, and the serial numbers matched up. Everything matched up with everything I knew from my research. It was indeed the Blue Whistler that they had totally restored to put on exhibit over at the high school.
Mm. So
Prior to that, it was at the high school. They did fire it a couple of times at football games, but then it was in such decrepit condition. They said, we're not going to do that anymore. So it went back into storage, and then it got restored
yeah,
totally with no plans on firing it ever again.
right. So
Now,
the
and you
yeah, go ahead.
and you want to know about McCrae? Eastwood High School is on McCrae,
Right.
named
Yeah.
after Captain McCrae.
Oh, and that's just coincidence.
No, I know. I think they absolutely knew it because it's Eastwood Troopers. The moniker happens to follow suit. That they
Uh,
dress in what looks like uniforms from the Civil War, but nicer looking.
Love it, love it. So, for those of you who are just joining us for the tail end of this conversation, we've been talking El Paso history with Bernie Sargent. He's written 3 books. We've talked about the topics of 2 of those books, one being the heroism of Marcelino Serna during World War I and Bernie's quest to get him a Medal of Honor. And we got it to Mike Pence, we got it to Biden, but they didn't go through. So we're supporting Bernie as he continues on with the current administration to get this true son of the borderland the recognition that he deserves. And then we've been talking about the Blue Whistler Cannon, another book that Bernie's written. What's the name of that book?
Blue Whistler Cannon.
Okay, okay, yeah. Well, the only stupid question is the one left unasked. So the Blue Whistler Cannon.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are interested in getting in touch with Bernie, you can go to desertvoice.media. That's a website, and you will find all of our former conversations on 915 Talk, and you'll also get his email address. You can send him an email, and he may or may not respond. Right, Bernie?
Hey, for the right amount of money, I'll respond to anybody.
Yeah, gotcha. So last question, because we're running out of time.
Okay. There's a lot more to this Blue Whistler Cannon too. We can talk about it at a later date because the people involved on the train, and it's a great story.
I would love to have more history conversations about El Paso. We're having these hour-long conversations every day, every weekday here on KELP radio, and I do believe it is important for us to understand the community that we live in. I'm relatively new to the area, but it's been a lot of fun to get to know it. But you moved away.
I did.
What is one thing you miss about El Paso?
People.
The people.
And we've got some great friends there. Still in touch with them. I write a regular article for City Beat magazine and on history, and just stay in touch with them. I've been honored with the Destination El Paso folks invite me over. Well, they invited me over last year, and they're talking about doing it on a regular basis to share the history with the people that are working at the Destination El Paso, the visitors, office and facilities. Just so that when folks come to town, they could share some of the great history that El Paso has, which I brag on over here all the time, because I'm very much involved with the history of this part of the world too now, and I share a lot of the history from far west Texas, because up until not too long ago, folks went, "Oh, there's a West Texas." I said, "Yeah, but West Texas is not Amarillo; it's El Paso."
Yeah. Well, I love it. My son is planning to go to Abilene for college, and it was funny for me when we went for a college visit. We drive 7 hours east, and we get there, and it says, "Welcome to West Texas."
Yeah, I know.
But
or like San Antonio, gateway to Mexico. Really?
Yeah. Exactly. So
hey, I got a quick question for you. What college are you looking at?
Abilene Christian.
Okay, because my grandson goes to college over there, but not Abilene Christian.
Okay, McMurray.
He's a heathen.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. So again, thank you, Bernie, for coming in. Would love to have more conversations with you about El Paso history and future programs. There's so much to unpack, so much to learn. And as we always say at the end of 915 Talk, let's learn to love our city, love our neighbor, and give God all the glory. This has been 915 Talk. You have been listening to 915 Talk, a production of Desert Voice Media. In order to listen to previous editions of 915 Talk, just visit desertvoice.media. Let's learn together to love our city, love our neighbors, and give God all the glory.